Thanks for attending our speed learning session at the AMLE Conference in Orlando this October. In this video, I'll take you step by step through the process of creating the student observation form that we spoke about in our session. So to get started on creating your student observation form, the first thing you need to do is to go into your Google Drive and create a folder. I'm going to call my folder Student Observations 2018-2019 because you're likely going to want to continue this each year. Now within that folder I need to create a few different things. First I need to create a Google Doc, which we'll come back to later. I need to create a Google Sheet, and I need to create a Google Form. Within these tools you're going to need some little special things to help you, which are called add-ons. So first we're going to head back to the spreadsheet, and in the Google Sheet you're going to click on add-ons, which is right here, and go to Get Add-ons. Now the add-on that you're looking for in Google Sheets is called Autocrat. Search it in there. Mine says Manage because I already have this add-on, but yours will look like this. It'll say plus free. So you're going to click on that, and then it will show up next time you click on add-ons right here. Now we also need a couple of add-ons for the form. So we're going to go back over to the Google Form, and to find the add-ons for the form, they're right over here on these three dots that say More. If you click on them and then head down almost to the bottom, there's a little puzzle piece that says add-ons. You're going to click on that, and the same screen will pop up for you to search, and the first one we need is something called Doc Appender. So there it is right there. So again, I already have it, so it says Manage, but it'll be a little blue free button for you. And the other one we need is called Email Notification for Forms. And here it is right here, Email Notification for Forms. So you'll have those available anytime you make a form, not just on this specific form. Now that we have all the tools we need, we're going to get started on making the student observation form. And the first place we need to start is on our Google Sheet. So this is where we're going to put the names of all of the students in our program or in our class. So first we need to start with a header. So first name, last name. And then you're going to add in the names of all of the students who you want to be included in this observation form. So it could be your whole middle school, it could be just your division, or just your team, or just your grade level, but that's all up to you. So you're just going to go in and you're going to add the kids, either one by one, or if you have a list of them somewhere else, you can always copy and paste them in. So now that I've finished inputting my students' names, the next thing I need to do is go and launch that add-on that I added earlier. So the add-on again was called Autocrat. So if I go up to add-ons, now I can see this listed, which is Autocrat. And what that's going to do is it's going to take each of the names on my list, and it's going to create a Google Doc specific to that name in the folder that I've started called Student Observations. So if I go to Autocrat and launch, it's going to bring up a window that's going to ask me a series of questions to find out what it is I want to do with this information. While it's loading, I'm going to head over to my Google Doc that I created earlier. And the only thing I need to do with this document is I need to name it so that I can find it later on. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to name it SO for Student Observation Template. And I'll show you later why that is. So I head back to my spreadsheet, and by now it's loaded, so it wants to know if I want to set up a job, and yes I do. New job. I have to name my job, so Student Observation 1819. And it's saying for me to choose a template. So what I need to do here is go and find that document that I had earlier. So I want a template from Drive. And here it is, so SO template, that's the one I wanted to use. That's just telling them that I want them to create a completely blank doc for each of the names in my class. So I have the right template. Next, merge tab, sheet 1. So I only have one sheet on this, so that's my only option. And then header is row 1, yeah, so my header is first name, last name, and the first data row is 2, correct. So now it's going to ask me, what do I want each of those docs that's going to be made by these names to be titled? So you can use tags. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say I want it to be named first name and then last name. So I'm going to do the little triangle, triangle. Oh, sorry. I don't think that's the technical term. Close triangles. I want a space in between. And I want it to be a Google Doc. So where do I want it to be kept? I want it to be kept in the student observation folder. Now all of this other stuff is optional, so I can just click next right through it, or if you just want to click save at any point, that works as well. Now that the job has been created, I need to run it. So I need to go up here to the little play button, and I need to run the job. This process can take quite a while, especially if you've got a lot of kids in your program. So it's a good idea to do some other work while this is running, or maybe go grab a coffee or watch some Netflix. Now my job is finally finished. It's been probably about 10 minutes. So I can tell that it's done because I see all of this extra stuff beside each of the names. So none of this stuff really means anything to me, but all it tells you is that now there should be a document for each of these kids inside that folder that we started at the beginning. So if we go back up to our student observation folder that we started at the very beginning of this process, inside we'll find a Google Doc for each student that you have in your class. So right now all that is a blank Google Doc. But that's going to be where all of the information from your student observation form will end up. And the final step of the process is to actually create the student observation form. So we're going to go back to the form that we started at the very beginning. And the first thing we need to do, of course, is name it Student Observations 2018-2019. So on here you're going to have a series of questions. It'll depend on what it is, what sort of information you're looking for from your teachers. But one question that you absolutely need to have is student name. So rather than going in and typing everything out, you're going to want it to be either multiple choice or a drop-down, whichever one you like better. I prefer the drop-down because then you don't have a huge list in front of you when you open the form. And if you click on option 1, you should be able to just copy and paste all of the names that you've already written out in the spreadsheet. So if I go in and I grab those first two columns and I'm going to copy them, I can just paste them right in and it'll show up as my 40 options for that question. You want to make sure it's a required question because the teachers are going to need to select what student they're observing. Okay, and then you can add whatever other questions you think will be important to your school. So for me, I always want to know who it is that's filling out the form. So I've added a question, teacher name, and that can just be short answer. We'll type it in. And then it can be just as simple as observation. So you may want to include date that it happened. You may want to include some categories that you put these things in. To give you an idea, I'll show you what we use at our school. So our observation form looks like this. So we've got student name, the date of the observation, and then I have some categories for them to choose from. And then they type their observation in right here. So it's up to you what the form itself looks like. So let's say we're just going to go with the simple form that we created earlier with student name, teacher name, and observation. So now what we're going to do is use those add-ons that we added at the very beginning of the thing. So this puzzle piece right here shows that you have an add-on. So we're going to click on it, and the first add-on that we want to use is Doc Appender. So we're going to click on Open Sidebar, which will just open all of our options over here. And it takes you through the steps pretty clearly. So the first thing is you're going to choose the folder where you want this information to be sent. So we're going to go back in and we're going to find our student observation folder. Here it is. Select. And the next thing is you're going to need to choose which question is the important question that tells where the information goes. So refresh the list so the questions show up. And the question that we want to use is student name. Save and populate. Now it wants to know what information you want to include on your form. So I usually choose timestamp because it's helpful to know when the observation happened. Student name we don't need to click because the document itself is named with the student's name, so that we will already know. Teacher name because we want to know who made the observation, and then we want the information that they observed. So down here, it just is asking you what format you want it to use on the Google Doc. I usually go with rows in a single horizontal table. It just looks the nicest to me, but that's completely up to you. Then you're going to go Enable, and we're all set. So we can close that out. And now I'll show you what that did. So if I complete this form, so right here is the preview, so I'm going to click on that to see what the form looks like to other teachers. So here I am on the form. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to create one of these observations. So I'm going to choose the student that I'm observing. So I'm observing Donald Duck. Teacher name. And my observation, I'm going to type it in here. Donald has been doing well in class, but he insists on arriving with no pants. It is disturbing the other students. Okay, so there's my observation. Submit. So you see that it only takes the teacher, 30 seconds to fill that out. No time at all, really. So now if I go over to our Google folder, sorry, where we have saved all of those Google Docs of all the students, and I click on it. Now we see that there is some information on Donald's. So if I click on that, now I can see that Dana Ellis, at this time on this date, had this to say about Donald. This might not look like much right now, but imagine 6 months down the road when you've got dozens of comments from all of Donald's teachers, maybe some of his coaches, his house parents if it's a boarding school, and how useful that can be to you as a program leader. To give you an idea, I'm going to head over to our observations from last year. So this is every student in our middle school last year, and you can see that there are dozens and dozens of comments on each of their forms talking about what they were doing in class that day, if there was an incident, or if they did something particularly positive. This is really helpful during parent-teacher, but also just to develop a better relationship with a kid. You wouldn't believe the difference it would make to just tap a kid on the shoulder and say, hey, I heard you had a really good math class today, or congratulations on improving so much on the violin and music class this week. So I share this folder with all of the teachers in the middle school, and that way at any point they can go in and check out a student's document and see if there's something that's happening in their class that might also be happening in other areas of the school. So it's really helpful to find patterns and trends to see if there's something that we can do to help a student where it might go unnoticed in another case if we just think it's only happening with us in our class. This way we can find out that it's not just us and that there's something else going on and that maybe we can step in and make some changes for that student. So our very last step is to try to ease the communication a little bit. So we're back on our student observation form that we created, and the last thing we want to do is use the add-on that we added in the beginning called email notifications for forms. So we're going to open that up and we're going to create an email notification. Form rule name doesn't really matter, student observation 1819. Email address to notify. So this is the person who's going to get an email every time this form is filled out. So I get it sent to myself. That would go usually to the head of the program, or maybe it goes to the division leader. And then reply to address, me as well, and then continue. You just click all the way through that. So the reason this is helpful is you don't have to constantly be going in to check to see if somebody has filled out the observation form. Instead, you're going to get a notification every time it's filled out. And as the program leader, I take those observation forms, read them through, and then I will forward them along to the people that I think need to know that information. So generally, that student's advisory teacher or homeroom teacher or anyone else that might be involved in their life that might need to know that information that might help them with the student. Thanks again for coming to our session. Hopefully this tutorial was helpful to you. If you have any questions at all, send me an email and I'll try to help you in any way that I can.